Hey, this is Gary, High Tech Redneck, and this is part 2 of fixing your Z-foam remote control model airplane. Okay, in the first part, I showed you how to, that I glued my fuselage back together where it snapped in half. The weak spot that seems to snap when the fuselage does is kind of right at the beginning of the battery compartment, right behind the engine, about that far back it seems to snap off. Now, I also covered, I'm going to cover again quickly, in my experience, when for instance gluing fuselage back together, there's a lot of surface area there to be covered by glue, and the hot melt glue gun won't put out the glue fast enough. It won't squirt out enough glue quick enough to cover all of those surface areas that got to go back together, and it starts setting up and getting tacky, and you start getting stringy, cheesy, Anyway, you don't want that. So, after much trial and error, I've went to the 2-part epoxy resin glue that comes in the syringe type applicators in 2 parts. You mix it together. The trick is stay away from the 5 and 15 minute setup time. Go with the 30-minute, because it gives you plenty of time to take your time and spread the glue out evenly on all the surfaces that have to go back together. And then, you can really take your time, and then you can fit your pieces back together and make sure that everything is lined up properly before that sets up. That's really important. Now, I want to talk to you about applicators. Okay? Hang on just a second. I have found that a trip to the dollar store, and you can buy 150 popsicle sticks for $1. Okay? And to apply this epoxy glue, to glue these back together, a popsicle stick seems to work fantastic. Works excellent for mixing the 2 parts together and then applying it on the surfaces that have to be mated back together. Works super. So now, with my T-28, after 2 crashes, basically the fuselage just snapped in half, and then the wing popped off. Now, when the wing damage to the actual wing itself was very limited to a couple of indentations, which we're going to go over fixing that in a second. But what I want to cover now is what happens to the wing when it gets tore off the fuselage. Now, what ends up happening so far is this particular wing, this is a low-wing model plane, T-28 Trojan. Now it has, on one end of it, it's got 2 male pins. On the underneath of the fuselage, it has 2 female holes where the pins go in. Okay, here are the actual pins. Now that tore out, and when it did, let me flip it. You can see where the foam here is busted, right? That's got to go back together straight. Okay, so what we will do is we'll separate the, we'll pull that apart a little bit right there. We'll apply some of the epoxy resin with popsicle stick, put that back together so that those are nice and straight. And then on the other side, what ends up happening usually is there's a plastic clip that's made onto the wing. It has a hole in it, and it screws onto a receptacle that's in the fuselage. Now, it tore this part here, glues onto the fuselage itself. It's not part of the wing. Okay, the screw, you got a screw that goes up through here, and then it goes into the female part, which belongs in the fuselage. So now I'm going to unscrew this. I'm going to unscrew this piece, and this glues back in the fuselage. So it'll just be another popsicle stick glue application and push that little piece back in. Okay. Now, other than that, I'm talking two pretty intense crashes now. And this wing, as far as damage to the wing itself, has been very limited. Now, the first crash, I said it had indentation. Let's see if we can pick this up with the camera. Right here, okay, you see kind of a indentation right there. Okay, now that's on the actual surface that cuts the air, and we don't want that. Okay, we don't want that. So how do we fix that without adding a lot of weight to that side and having a problem bouncing the aircraft? Well, I'll tell you what I do is you can't really see it. Well, you can see it with my finger here as I run my finger up over the edge. You can see that the surface actually matches the two on either side there that are. But what I did was I got a really wide piece of like transparent tape, but it's much tougher. 3M tape, Scotch brand. Okay, it comes in a roll like this. It is it's 2 1/4 inches wide. What you do is you tear off a piece like that, and you put it right on the leading edge of the wing, bend it over, and it will cover those indentations just like new. Doesn't add any weight. Returns the leading edge surface to normal. Da 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 da. You're done. Okay. So hopefully this has been helpful with fixing your Z-foam model. Once again, we'll review quickly here the basic important steps. Clean your mating surfaces that have to go back together. Use a 2-part epoxy that has a 30-minute set time. Popsicle stick applicator gives you plenty of time to mix it up, apply it, get a good dose of that epoxy all over those mating surfaces, you know. And before you put the epoxy on, put your pieces of Z-foam back together and make sure they fit nicely. Okay? And these things go together. You can glue them together over and over and over and over again, because if it breaks again, usually the part that you glue together becomes stronger than the actual material itself. So, you know, if you break it again, it's not going to break in the same spot. It's going to break somewhere else down the line, as a rule. And that's about that. This last crash that I had, I broke the push rod from the aileron push rod here. It broke the servo horn off the servo. In other words, the little deal that the push rod snaps into, snap that off. So ain't like when you got 100 of those at about 2 cents a piece. Different shapes and sizes. But other than that, man, I guess as a plug for Parkzone, this is one tough model, man. Because I mean, I'm telling you, I stuffed it in the trees that had to be at least 40 miles an hour, man. I stuffed it through a line of trees. And I mean, when it went through there, when it went through them line of trees, man, bam! That wing hit 2 saplings and ripped it off the fuselage. That wing's still in one piece, man. I haven't had to glue shit back on this wing, except those 2 little tabs right there. Had to glue those back on. Fuselage, man, snapped right in half, just as pretty as you please. Everything went back together, glued back together, and it flew again. So where I'm at with my flying is I'm still keeping at it, you know. It's like, by God, I got this now. It's like I'm gonna learn how to become efficient at it. But I took a little bit too large of a step. You know, I should have went to a high wing aileron trainer instead of a low wing sport plane. But I'll get it.